The perfect start to any televisual motoring feast. Classical music, a summer's day, an empty road and a supercar. Nice. Nice, but not nice enough for extreme machines. Not by a long way. Sorry, excuse me. You know, the Lamborghini Diablo has a problem. It only has a one engine, and it's a puny 5.7 litres, so it's too small. Now, if it had two and they were 8 litres each, well then, you could do this. Class 1 offshore powerboat racing has been likened to standing in the shower tearing up £50 notes. The cost is simply horrendous. Not only do you need two of those 1,000 horsepower engines, but two 4-speed gearboxes and two propellers. You even need two drivers. In Class 1, you get a big bill, and then you double it. But an enormous amount of money isn't enough. Colossal horsepower isn't enough. You see, water, as you'll no doubt have noticed if you've ever tried to wade anywhere in it, is sticky stuff. It slows you down. Put 2,000 horsepower in a car and you'll go hundreds of miles an hour. But ask 2,000 horsepower to push a 50-foot hull through this stuff. You barely crack 50 miles an hour. So the best thing you can do if you want to go fast in water is get out of it. A Class 1 boat is designed to fly with just the bottom half of its $10,000 propellers under the surface. To find out how this is done, I went in search of Steve Curtis, a driver whose boat was being prepared for the 1997 championship. Now, I expected to find him wearing loose robes while men tinkered with the engines and polished the canopies which come off F-16 fighters. But he was actually helping to build it, so he should know how it works. How do you get a 4.5-ton boat out of the water, then?
Well, you basically start off with an awful lot of horsepower.
Yeah.
And we've got about 1,000 aside in here.
Yeah.
And then really, to get going, we trim these down a little. They're on big pistons.
These move?
Yeah, these go up and down.
Yeah.
We trim those down a little, put our trim tabs down a little.
These things. So that's all adjustable.
That's all adjustable.
So if you push that down the front of the boat, the back comes up, the front goes down. Yeah.
And then you're up on the plane when you accelerate.
Yeah.
And as you go forward...
Hold on a minute. This does not look very smooth here.
No, it's not meant to be. It's meant to be very sharp, and the idea is the water rushes along there, and suddenly there's a void, so it creates bubbles, and the boat runs on the bubbles at that point. Less friction.
Bubbles are air.
Bubbles air, running on air. Less friction.
The other thing as well is if you look at the shape of the boat, it's like, you can actually see it's like an aeroplane wing, yeah?
Very much so. We're working on this getting narrower and larger, and then tapering away to give us lift, just like an aeroplane wing.
And then in here, I saw some tanks.
That's a bow tank. That we can pick up water as we're going along, just in case the front of the boat's running too high. You can weigh it down a little bit with water.
Scoop it up.
Just scoop it up off the sea.
Pointy front end, aerodynamics.
Aerodynamics, cut through the air.
That. And then in here, right, air rushes in, yeah?
Yep.
What's to stop it just shooting out at the back again?
Well, we've got a little wing on the back which we can put down, which creates even more lift.
Why is there a number underneath here?
Oh, that's just in case the crew crash the thing and it goes upside down. They know which boat it is.
Because it's all set up for flat seas, this, isn't it?
Yeah, it's all set up for, you know, flat water, perfectly trimmed for high speed, about 150 miles an hour in the flat.
But the water, the sea, isn't always flat.
Well, you're just about right there.
This is like watching a Formula One car do the RAC rally. But that's what these boats must endure. Now, Steve's is owned by the same Norwegian who's just bought Wimbledon Football Club. The catamaran hull, like the engines, had been built in Italy, but the final touches had been done at Steve's workshops here in England. To find out if everything had gelled, Steve obviously had to test it. And that meant he needed a co-driver. Someone brave, talented and blessed with a deep-seated knowledge of exactly what he was doing. Right, it's my job to steer and navigate, which in this crowded Southampton waterway is a very, very difficult job indeed. And it's his job to just operate the throttles, which is a piece of cake.
You must be kidding.
It is easy.
I've got to move these throttles back and forth so we don't flip this over backwards. I've got to adjust the trim, adjust the flaps, adjust the bow tank.
This is incredible. The speed limit down here is 5 miles an hour, and we're going, according to my GPS speedometer, 142. Oh, wait a minute, I've got a turn here, I've got a turn.
Well, turn.
Hold on.
You got it?
Oh, my God. You can actually feel this thing gripping. You may not believe it, but you can feel it gripping. So I just want to get some pictures of what we're doing. Right, there we go.
Well, it shows how easy it is to drive. You can even take photos of me when I'm going along.
Can we lose the helicopter?
Yeah, grab hold of the wheel with something. It might help build up my confidence.
I've got it, I've got it.
All right, here we go, into third.
Oh, that's unbelievable. How often do you crash these things?
You have an accident a year, I would think.
With that in mind, I suddenly decided the boat was fine and ready for the first race of the year. In Capri. Now here, on an ordinary day, the blondes are as platinum as the credit cards. But when the powerboat Jet Set rolls up, they get set for some serious rocket-powered spending. The throttlemen may be hired hands, but the steerers are something else. You've got Arabs, of course, and Italian playboys with eyes that can undress women at 40 paces. And we mustn't forget the Norwegian fish billionaires, who certainly don't waste their money on razors. So in this sport, what interests me is you have Shell, you have Bjorn, the Norwegian guys, wealthy guys, to be honest. Why do you risk it all out there doing something that is very dangerous?
I don't know, and that's a difficult question. I think that for each one of us, the motivation is different. I've been doing this for a long time. I've always loved to see boats, cars, everything which has an engine on, really, and especially the sea. And it's a passion. It's difficult to explain. Of course, we are not as competitive as you'd be, in Formula One. I mean, we are still, lots of us are friends. I mean, Steve, for example, is a friend. We raced together for years. So it was, even when we are out there, of course, we are competing. No presents done to anybody. But still on the paddocks, there is still probably more friendship that you would have in Formula One. Yeah. Because there is less money involved, of course.
This is one sport where a billionaire, can go out, buy himself the best possible boat, get himself a good throttle man, sit in the other side and steer, and be a world champion.
Yeah, I think that case is reasonably true, but they also need to be pretty good drivers nowadays. Whereas in sort of the early 80s, they could have got by and just almost navigated and just sort of stood there. Now they really do have to put up with some severe beating, and they need to know what they're doing. Sometimes when it's rough, that you come back and, for a day or so you're urinating blood. You can have, obviously there's a lot of back problems. You can smash vertebrae. So you can be in a fairly bad way for a few days after a race.
This sport has it all. Danger, speed, glamour. And yet we know nothing about it. It's never on TV because the boats can outrun the tracking helicopters. And there's no point turning up either because all you'll see is sea. Here's one here. No, it isn't. Just twinkling. Maybe a fish. There you go. Another 12 minutes, it'll be back. Because this sport gets so little coverage, almost no one knows that Steve Curtis, the man driving this boat, has been a world champion. Twice. Nobody in England's heard of you. Doesn't that annoy you a bit?
I think it did when I started, but now, I mean, it's just not a greatly followed sport in the UK. There's not much I can do about it. You know, I go out there, I do my thing, I enjoy it, and that's what I get out of it.
Steve tried racing cars, but says you can't get a Porsche 50 feet in the air. He says car racing is basically far too safe. Car racing, however, is organised. Moments before our powerboat race was due to start, and for reasons that were never made entirely clear, it was cancelled. This sport could be so good if only they'd get their act together. The only people who are happy about this cancellation are the Australian team, who missed the plane to get here in the first place. Everyone else, the boats, the trucks, the hospitality units, the chefs, the drivers, the managers, the mechanics, the hangers-on, they came all the way to Capri for nothing. Still, it's only money. You don't haul an aircraft carrier halfway round the world to defend a country from the perils of oppression and then decide to go home because it's a bit humid. You have to stick around, which in Vietnam, of course, meant dropping napalm on people in pyjamas. It doesn't sound that hard, but the pilots will tell you that this was a breeding ground for heroes.
Okay, we got you inside.
Vietnam had at the time what was the best air defense system that the world had ever seen.
Did you ever discover what it was like to get a missile coming at you?
I certainly had plenty of anti-aircraft artillery directed against my airplane, but I never got to actually have to defeat my own surface-to-air missile, which didn't really bother me any. One of the schools that I got to go to when I was flying the F-4 Phantom was the Navy's Fighter Weapons School, which all of us commonly know as Top Gun.
As the youngest ever pupil, he was singled out for greatness and went on to be a test pilot, which is easily the daftest job in the world. You have to climb into a brand new plane and at Mach 2 find out if it matches up to the manufacturer's claims.
Well, there's certainly a healthy skepticism about what they've said it will do. You certainly have to take it at least up to whatever limit you're going to allow the operational pilots to take it to. And in most cases, what you will do is you'll take it slightly beyond where you're going to allow them to take it. So you have to push the very limit of the capability of that aircraft.
To relax these days, he now has a racing plane in which he's just set a world altitude record at 27,000 feet. But his personal best is somewhat better because today...
We have main engine start.
Hoot Gibson flies the space shuttle.
Solid rocket ignition and liftoff.
We go from liftoff to orbital speed, which is 17,500 miles an hour, in the space of 8.5 minutes.
Roger, roll, Endeavour.
If you spend your life flying fast jets and then move into a space shuttle, is that not like going from a Ferrari into being a lorry driver?
Well, in some ways it is, because a space shuttle is a delivery truck, and that was what it was designed to do, was to carry things into space, to be a trash hauler, we refer to it as sometimes. But in other ways, it's like moving from a a Volkswagen into a very fast Ferrari, because this is the highest and fastest flying airplane in the world. It may be a delivery truck, but it flies at 25 times the speed of sound, which is much faster than any other airplane that's ever been built.
Solid rocket booster separation confirmed.
One of the things that you can't help but notice is when you're up circling this one Earth that we're on, is that the borders, the national boundaries, are not very apparent. And you can't help but thinking maybe we ought to all get along a little bit better, because we are all, in fact, just residents of this one Earth. And it might be nice if we wouldn't think of ourselves as Americans or Canadians or French or whatever.
We'd never get on with the French. Is it always smooth out there, or do things go wrong?
On every flight that I've been on, we had some mechanical system break down to where we had to get our toolboxes out and go behind the panels and pull connectors and pull plugs, and frequently use some duct tape or use some wiring kits that we have to work around a problem that we have on board the shuttle. So you will always have something go wrong in the course of a flight.
Main gear touchdown.
It's certainly one of those occupations that I think everybody would just love a chance to go do. And I still pinch myself in the morning when I get up to believe that they actually selected me and that I get to go do this in my life.
He is a lucky guy because he gets a view of the world where the only evidence of man's existence is the Great Wall of China. Well, that's what they say. But come on, what about this? It's the Yara Viking, the largest moving man-made object on the planet. Stood on its end, it would be 50 feet taller than the Empire State Building. Its holds are big enough to swallow St. Paul's Cathedral 4 times over. And to ward off bad weather, they've fitted a hideous gargoyle on the bow.
Well, that was a great plan. Worked a treat. But then, what do you expect? I mean, we are going round the Cape of Good Hope, just off the tip of southern Africa, right in the middle of winter. I hope this thing's got a big engine.
Oh, good. It has.
That's wrong, and that should be lit, I'm sure of it. That's the gearbox. Boiler. Another boiler. Amazingly, it only has one propeller, which does a mere 75 revolutions a minute, but it's 30 feet in diameter, so the engine has to be colossal. All the numbers in this ship just boggle the mind, including the temperature down here, but strangely, it only has 2 lifeboats.
Amazingly, that's all it needs, because this 500,000-ton giant is run by a crew of just 35. And to the consternation of various coastal seabirds, most of them, including the captain, learned to drive in India.
I've been to Bombay, and the standard of driving there is shabby. So,
But we are not on the roads, we are at sea.
is that safer then?
It's much safer, and we are most qualified individuals. We are professionals.
Professionals, right, yeah. How fast does the ship go?
When fair weather, she could do as much as 16 and a half knots.
Does the weather affect it?
Oh, very much. If you have adverse weather, she comes down quite a bit.
Now, we hear a lot of stories about how long it takes to stop one of these things.
Around 8,000 meters, about 5.5 miles.
5.5 miles
Yeah,
to stop
from
it.
full head to stop.
And what about the turning circle?
Turning circle, now these factors depend on what sort of weather condition. You see, normally in fair weather, she might turn within 2 miles.
Oh, you could do it in 2 miles?
Yeah.
Oh, positively sprightly.
I am standing on 137 million gallons of crude oil, which is worth around about $90 million. Now, no cargo ship in the world has a load quite as valuable as that.
They can paint the huge deck until they're red in the face, but one day, man's biggest maritime achievement will have to be scrapped.
Then what do? You can't just sink it, you can't let it rot, and you can't break it up in a port either, because there's no port anywhere in the world big enough to take a ship like this. You're stuffed.
No, you're not, actually. You see, when the scrap value exceeds the cost of keeping the Yara Viking going, it'll be taken to Bangladesh, where, at high tide, it'll be rammed into the beach. And then the locals, who earn £1 a day, will tear her to pieces. That piece was bigger than my house. This is scrap metal dealing on a biblical scale. It's Steptoe and Son meets Ben-Hur. These are the killing fields for tankers. Watching a tanker being pulled apart largely by hand was one of the most awesome spectacles I'd ever seen. Until I got to Albuquerque, where every year they have a hot air balloon festival. In 1997, it was quite a big one. As dawn broke, a world record began to fall. In just 1 hour, 648 balloons were airborne in the same place at the same time.
It's the end of the programme right now, and I know the only decent bar in Albuquerque is that way. And we are going that way. Brilliant. Just bloody brilliant.
Coming up, you don't get away from the great man that easily. If you've had enough of cars, let Jeremy take you on a voyage of speed and sheer engine power discovery. Clarkson's Extreme Machines, next.